Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined me at the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. It is my pleasure and really very fascinating interest to introduce you to two of my guests today. Let me introduce Dr. Lisa Cowley and Victor Westgate. They're married and they wrote a book, an interesting book, in my opinion, called Pack Lightly, Making Sense of the Second Half of Your Life. So I'm in the second half of my life, and some interesting things are starting to bubble up. You know, things like perimenopause, things like aches and pains, things like my kids are growing up and sort of the landscape is sort of starting to change a little bit. And I think this is a great topic for all of you who are listening, who are maybe in the same age bracket or getting there. So Victor and Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Kim.
So, you know, we spoke a couple of minutes ago and you gave me a little bit of a warning. You said your dog might bark because your dog has been through a lot of stuff, operation and life or death kind of situation. So for everyone who's listening, please keep that in mind. If you hear a barking dog, be patient and have a little bit of compassion. But you also said that you're living in the woods.
Yes.
So let's start there. Why are you living in the woods? Has that been your life? Have you been living in the woods your whole life, or is that a relatively new thing?
Good question. First of all, it's an upstate New York cabin. I and Lisa lived on Long Island for personally about 30 years. I moved back, quote, upstate New York to be near my parents about 10 years ago. And it was my dream when I left teaching to build a log cabin, you know, in a beautiful area where we are. We have 25 acres. We have a lake literally across the road. Privacy galore, beautiful woods. We even did shiitake mushrooms for a while, but my point is we love where we are. We've been here about 10 years. And in that process, we've tried some different projects. Some would say after you retire, you go into a period of refinement. And that's kind of what it is for me. As I say, I stopped teaching about 10 years ago, and we've been living here ever since, but we've been traveling across the United States literally for the last 7 years. And in that time, we've been interviewing people, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, so I want to actually go back because you said something really interesting. You said you did shiitake mushrooms. What does that mean? You did mushrooms?
Well, what happened was I'm a retired chiropractor and nutritionist. I practiced 23 and a half years on Long Island. Victor, 34 years teaching high school and history and economics. So when we moved upstate and we were like, what's next? We went to Cornell and took a class and we learned how to grow mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms on logs. So that's what he means, did mushrooms. We had a little business.
Yeah, we didn't inhale.
We sold mushrooms to restaurants and to different stores, purveyors. And then it was very physical. We were lugging about 1,000 logs in our woods.
Wow.
It's a big process. And then after that, we said, okay, now is time to use our brain. And because of the rich landscape of meeting so many people on the road around our age group, and we interviewed 20 individuals between the age of 50 to 75, and we recorded them. We listened many times to their interviewees' response, and we said, let's write a book about the second half of life.
Okay, so I just want to go back. You were, call it raising mushrooms. Is that the right terminology? You were raising mushrooms. You were
harvesting.
Yeah.
Harvesting.
Yeah.
That's right. They're not your children. You were raising mushrooms, and you were physically lugging logs, but this was a seasonal thing, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then when it was off season, you were traveling.
Yes.
And did you have like a trailer? Were you traveling that way, or did you just fly to places? Like what did that look like?
Right. We wrote in the book about it. We have right now what's called a road trek model. It's actually from Kirchner, Ontario. It's a Class B.
My neck of the woods.
Yeah, Class B motorhome. We've had 3 of them. This one we've had for almost 5 years. It's a Class B motorhome. We live in it for 3 months of the year, literally traveling across the United States in it. And in so doing, birding, walking, hiking, biking, and meeting people. And we've gone everywhere.
So you're outdoorsy kind of people.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so you start bumping into people, and where are you bumping into them? At restaurants or on the trails? Like, how do you meet these people?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of it is in the campgrounds because
Okay.
as you pull your rig up, usually Victor has a big hello across his chest. So instantly I'll say, oh, I see they're waiting outside their rig to talk to someone. Can you just wait till I set up inside, you know, the bedding, the kitchen, because there's a little place, but he instantly gets into conversation with people. And a part of it, he says, is to check out the area because, you know, you're not used to landing in a strange place. So he's
Right.
assessing the place and the people. But through that, you meet a lot of interesting people.
Okay, so you found 20 people who are willing to be interviewed in this adventure. Now, were they like women, men? Did they all have certain characteristics? Were they talkers? Like, how did you choose them? And how did they kind of raise their hands and say, yes, I want to be part of this adventure?
Part of it was serendipity. I mean,
Okay.
we literally meet someone who was very interesting to talk to. Some of them were people we knew ahead of time. I've interviewed people, for example, that were teachers. We've interviewed people, one woman who's a hospice nurse that we met at a wedding and got to know her well. So, you know, it was sometimes planned and sometimes unplanned, but mostly unplanned. And, but I mean, we met one couple from, I can't speak the name of the city or town in, up in your neck of the woods in, where are they located? Andre and Guilan.
Oh, they're from Quebec.
Yeah, they're in the high peaks of
My home.
yeah, high
province.
peaks of Quebec, and we've become friends. We've actually met up with them twice now. Once in Fredericksburg, Texas, and then this past most recent winter in Florida, and spent time together because we become friends as a result of the interviewing. So it's kind of cool.
So what questions did you ask them? Like, were they all the same questions for everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
we had a list of 25 questions.
Okay, so give me a sample.
A sample would be something like, so where do you want to age in place? Do you consider yourself retired? Who's in your tribe? What makes you happy? What makes you tick? You know, what do you hope to do in the next 10 years? What are you doing to keep yourself healthy? These kinds of questions.
What did you discover? Was there a common theme? Now, remember, in my mind, you're like talking to all these outdoorsy type of people.
Sure.
Not everybody's an outdoorsy type of person. So
That's true.
were you kind of interviewing people that you found had similarities because of that
Well,
commonality?
I would have to say that part of the book is the response of the interviewees, part of it's our story, and part of it's research.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful blend, really, of all three. So when we interview the people, because a lot of people don't like to be proselytized to about what they should be doing, so we wove it into a story. One of the readers said, I felt like the way that Lisa and Victor disseminated information was like a good friend talking to you. So that's when you say, were these people all the similar type? Not really, but because they had differences in how they looked at life, it helps the reader to say, oh, there's many ways that I could go through the second half of life. I would say one thing that really came as a pivotal type of experience, and this is something we mentioned at the conclusion, is through the research we did and through our interviewees, that if you have a sense of purpose, then you go through the second half of life much more gracefully. So that would be, like, in a nutshell, probably all the chapters have to do in some way about living purposefully.
Okay, so give me an example of the type of purposes that people in the second half of life are living. Like, what are they? Is it a project? Is it a relationship? Is it you know, a goal? How would you describe the different purposes that you've encountered?
Well, I would say the number one theme that we were talking about as far as relationships is we asked them a question, are you closer to your family or a tribe? meaning like outside your family. And so we found a real split that some people in the second half of the life have created more of a family feeling with people that are in their tribe that versus family, and some just feel very close to their immediate family. So a sense of purpose has to do, we know, with having very strong social relations. And that is number one. And I would say that then the purpose could be that some people are still working in their chosen field, or they've decided that they always wanted to do something like music or art, that is much more their purpose than their chosen profession before. And probably that another thing is that a lot of people maybe that ignored their health have really, really taken steps to become more healthy in the second half of life. So we demonstrate that too.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. The people that you encountered, were they mostly, again, male, female, married, single, or widowed?
A mix of all the above,
yeah.
truly.
Okay.
Okay. And your other question was a good one in terms of their, what they're doing in this, third chapter, if you will. Some of them believe in generativity, trying to give back to others. Some of them are starting something they never did before. I mean, one guy, this person we know, Andre from Quebec, he built his own Class B motorhome. And when I say built it, it's so beautifully done inside, better than even Road Trek could do or Travato. I mean, it's just outrageous what he's made his life project to be, and then to travel with it. One person we interviewed wants to be the greatest golfer on the senior circuit, which basically means he's a good golfer, but he wants to pursue that.
Right.
And one woman that we interviewed was a hospice nurse in Chicago, and now after we had our interviews, she said, now you're making me think more about maybe it's time to retire, which in fact she has done since then.
Okay.
Now we've done follow-up with her, and she's spending more time with her family. And so the interviews were, why did we do the interviews? I think we did it because we have something to share. I mean, I've been out of teaching for 10 years. I know things now I didn't know 10 years ago. I want to share that with people. And in turn, in interviewing people, we got people to think about things they hadn't thought about. And they're now glad they had that conversation.
So I want to kind of ask two questions. Number one is, what do you have to share? Like, what are the lessons learned? Okay, so we need a purpose, but how do we find one? Do we just walk down the street and go, oh, there's a purpose? No. Like, how do we find the purpose?
Go ahead.
How do we find purpose? I would say, just talking now about what we're going through with COVID-19, I was thinking a little bit about it, and I was saying that right now people are finding that due to this crisis, there's an opportunity, and that opportunity is bubbling up inside somebody, passions and thoughts, experiences that they never had before. And I talk about the 3 C's of longevity in the book, but I was thinking, okay, I would say there's 3 C's post-COVID. And the first is change. I think everyone's life is going to be changed. And that the thing that's going to give them is the second C is creativity. And so when you say, how do they find? Well, they're going to have bubbling up a creative passion of either how to create a new economic base for themselves or a new plan of action, their health. And then I would say the third C is fierce compassion. There's going to be so many people that need so much, and that's when we do what we can. And so that could be your purpose, is becoming more of a compassionate being.
And how are those 3 C's, which I love, by the way, those are awesome.
Thanks.
How are those 3 C's different from the ones you originally outlined?
Well, I had said the 3 C's of longevity, being a chiropractor and nutritionist, was number 1, clear the deck of all the things that are impeding good health, meaning like improper diet, lack of rest, you're inactive, that clear the deck. You have to just get down to the bare bones. Then the second was to create a personalized diet, and the third is to commit to the healthy lifestyle. So now that we're going through this time, I said, wait, we have another 3 C's. So once again, I'm going to say change, that's our reality. 2, be creative. And 3, fierce compassion.
Amazing. So I'm very interested in one thing in particular. It's like right now we're isolated, and a lot of people in that second half of life are alone physically, and they aren't connected. They don't have a social tribe. They can't see their family members, and maybe perhaps they are widows who have, uh, the experience of grieving, just this unending pain, you could say, a cycle of pain. What do you recommend for people in that situation?
One of the things that we talk about, even I think it's actually chapter 1, is aging in place and what that means. And one of the things, when I was saying to you before, Kim, that I've learned things I didn't know before, case in point, I didn't really think about, well, what kind of places can people live in as they grow old? Because let's face it, if you're not happy where you are now and you think about making a change, most of us can't keep making changes. If we're going to make a change in where we live, we're going to have to do it if we can, and won't be able to repeat that. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you can't,
and I just want to say one more thing is that if you're not happy with where you are, you make a change, you tend to bring your unhappiness
absolutely,
with you, right? Like,
sure,
yes, your physical environment changes, but if you bring the same mindset, the same emotional state to the new place, nothing actually changes.
Right.
Just the walls.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Good point. And the other thing I would say to that is, for those who either can't move or are looking for a place to move to, one of them, which I never thought about before, and through the research we discovered, is what they call the NORC, a naturally occurring retirement community. And they're set up all over the United States, and you can just go to their website and you either find out where they are, or they give you a template for creating your own. So for people who can't move but are in an isolated area, for example, there are ways and groups to help you set up your own naturally occurring retirement community. So you create, a connection between you. They usually set up some kind of real crude office. I mean, they might spend $10,000 for the whole group, composite total, but in that they're going to have somebody who basically orchestrates for them this organization that might involve miles and miles of people, but help them set up coordinating activities, coordinating someone to go get food for someone, coordinating Monday nights, getting together for a movie, transportating them to a doctor. I mean, the biggest one right now that's the model example is Beacon Village in Boston. And we go about talking about them, and in particular that one, and how they set up theirs. So to me, that was fascinating.
I wonder if there's anything like that in Canada. I need to look it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
very, very interesting.
I hate to keep bringing up my poor friend, Andre, but
is he poor?
No. What he's actually doing with his friends, where he lives in a community where he has about 12 to 15 friends, and they're setting up, trying to create a community for themselves, that they're looking into the funding from the Canadian government to set up a housing project where they would go to live, because they all know each other, kind of like a co-housing, but at the same time, they would never own it. They'd only rent it. And when they leave, someone else can come in. But the point is, they're trying to set that up. They do have government support in doing that.
So kind
of
like
doing the research.
It's kind of like a self-run retirement home.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, those are ways to build social connectivity. I mean, in this little rural area we live in, we just happen to be around a lake, and we've had neighbors that are elders that we've befriended, but a lot of that goes by the wayside in busyness. And when you live in other certain type of either suburbs or cities, people don't even know their neighbors.
Yeah.
So that's like what I think is going to happen with the fierce compassion. The third C is that our visual plane is going to be so much more acute because of this experience that we're going through with COVID-19, to build fierce compassion. And so the book It's funny, you know, with the pack lightly making sense to the second half.
Can you lift it up and show us?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
All right. We're so proud of it.
You should be.
Oh,
It's a lot
Good
of work.
looking book.
yeah,
Yes,
thanks.
it's a labor
yeah.
of love.
Yeah. But there's a lot that we can learn about this post-COVID. I was reading the introduction. I'm like, it's totally about what we're going through, because it's like we're digging our roots deeper in the second half of your life chronologically. I'm like, wait a minute, everybody's learning to do that now. Is we're digging much deeper than we ever dreamed that we'd have to.
I want to talk about the title Pack Lightly. And what are you saying? Are you saying we should like start purging things? Like
Yes.
we should physically carry less stuff with us?
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about that.
I would say that's probably it physically, but also I think that metaphorically, pack lightly is also dematerializing to become more spiritual. And that's, to me, the beauty of the second half of the life. It's not like money isn't a great thing because it buys a lot of freedom and it's a tool, but those things you don't carry with you your whole life. And this last chapter of the book is called, well, we talk about the first chapter, sense of place, the second chapter's sense of direction, and then the third is sense of connection, then sense of time, sense of body, mind, spirit, and the last is sense of grace. And we start out right away, we all have an expiration date. We're all going to die. And our lack of understanding that and our fear of mortality is the thing that right now is what we're going through in the COVID-19, is people are petrified even thinking about that. So if we can prepare ourselves with the pack lightly, our fear won't get in the way and we can start truly living life.
So I still have a few more questions for you. Number one is, do you have children?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, we have, yeah.
And how does having, let's call it adult children, maybe grandchildren, play a role in pack lightly? Because, you know, like I have 5 kids, they're adults, but young adults, young adults.
Right.
And, you know, I still worry about them a little bit.
Yes.
I still kind of keep an eye on them. I still help them out. They're still on my of things to make sure are good, in a good place, healthy, happy. I still have that feeling of not entire responsibility. It's not like they're 5, but they're part of my, I don't know if that's purpose or something else.
It has to be
What do you
purpose, definitely purpose. I would add to that one of the things we talk about in the book, Kim, is that we, including you, although I still have a hard time thinking you're in the second half, but but we are the sandwich generation, not only with our children, as you well speak of, but also our parents. And one of the things that we learned and we share in real terms, and sincerely so, in our book, is what it was like for us, in particular, and myself, coming back. One of the reasons we moved to where we are now was that my parents were falling apart. I hoped to get there in time, but then they both went into nursing homes, but we got them together every week. What it was like for us caring for them, what it was like for us watching them die, what it was, watching them die visually, literally, in holding their hand. And this is something our generation, some of people have never experienced. And we tell them from our own personal experience, but not in a modeling way, what to expect. And also too, that, there's hospice and then there's hospice. And we educate people on what it's like and what to look out for and what to prepare for. 45% of the people our age haven't even done a will. That's not because they can't, it's because they don't want to face it. So there's a lot to be said for that, being prepared for that last chapter. And we share, along with our interviewees, what that's like. And I think people have a thirst for that, even if they're afraid to know.
Yeah, but I think Kim wanted to know, yes, I have a daughter and Victor has a son, and we joined forces 26 years ago. And both of our children are, well, my daughter's going to get married this year.
Congratulations.
And yes, my stepson is just single, but they're both in their 30s. And I'm very impressed because they're both very capable, very spiritual. They're very good role models for us.
Right, sure.
So
we're learning a lot from them.
We're learning a lot from them. A lot.
I have one last question. Where are you physically? I understand you're in the woods, but is this a house you built with your own hands? Like, what is this thing that you're living in that we can see behind us? Behind you is very wooded and looks quite beautiful.
It is. It's a beautiful log cabin. It's 10 years old. It's 12-inch full log. There isn't a piece of sheetrock in the house.
Wow.
10-foot ceilings.
A gorgeous fireplace.
Yeah, well, there's two of them. One downstairs, one upstairs. One is gas.
But it's a small house.
But it's a small house. It's a small footprint.
How many square feet? It's small.
Yeah, no, it's a 2-bedroom.
And we use every room. So it's like we're packing lightly in the sense that we don't have a palatial. And we walk our woods. We have 23 acres. We walk our woods every day with our dog. We have a big, huge garden and we're growing our own food. I have plants in the grow light. So that's about packed lightly too, is how to be more sustainable. And so it's not like we're living in a palatial house. It's small.
So I have one last question for you. Are you ready? But you each have to answer it separately.
Okay.
The same question for both of you. Think about your life maybe 20 years back, right? You were 20 years younger. Is this what you imagined? Is this what you dreamed? And what great surprise emerged as a result of your decisions?
You first.
Oh, jeez. Be careful what you dream for. You may get it. Okay. You know, it is, you know, it was my dream to have a log home. It was my dream to be where I am in a way, but it didn't pan out completely that way. My parents have passed. I didn't really get to share what I have with them. You know, when I stopped teaching, it was my expectation that I would become what's referred to as a labor relations specialist. I moved upstate thinking that I'd be an advocate for union presidents, and that didn't pan out. So, like a lot of us, when we retire from something, I've been retired more than 10 years, but I've been doing a lot of interesting things since then, but not what I expected I would be doing. But I guess that's part of what's called being accommodating, being flexible. And I think the last 20 years have taught me to become more flexible. I do yoga to stretch my mind. That's not always working, but it is helping with the body. And so, you know, what I expected 20 years ago and what I have now is a part of, but, you know, that's a great question. And you see me caught in grasp because it's not easy.
You need to add it to your list of interview questions.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
I like that.
It's a good question.
It's a good question.
It's a fair question.
Lisa, how about you?
I always was an adventurous spirit ever since I was a young girl. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and I've lived in about 35 places. I went to 4 different high schools. I always look at what the future is. I don't really perseverate on the past. Sometimes I wish I was in the moment a little bit more, but I'm always thinking about what's next. So I would say that my life has been wonderful, and it's always going to be something even more wonderful. So when you ask me, is this the life I dreamed about? Yes, because it's one big adventure, especially with this one.
I think Victor, you have a certain appearance on the outside, but I think on the inside, it's a whole different ball of wax.
Oh,
that's my guess.
Yeah.
You look very serious on the outside, but I think on the inside, you're like this.
Yeah, he's much more emotional even than me.
Yeah.
You should have seen with this thing with our dog. Oh my gosh, I thought I was a mess, but he was much more emotional. So it was kind of intense to see that, because here we wrote this chapter about death, and we went through it with his parents. I went through it with my dad when I was young. But when it's your dog, it's your
whole different story.
It's like a whole nother.
Yeah, and we hesitate to talk too much about that because, I mean, there are people going through family,
Oh
Yeah.
my
human being
gosh.
deaths. And
Yeah.
I would never compare, but you have to deal with what you have.
Sure.
And for us, because our kids are off somewhere else, I always tell Sam, no pressure on having a baby. We got one now. And when you're ready, we'll be ready. But in any case, it's been difficult the last couple of weeks. And on the other hand, one of the things we talk about in the book, which I love, was, and this is how I say we've helped other older people our age get ready as they get older, is we suggested, a few years before my dad died, I gave him a list of questions. And I said, I'd like you to put these in a journal and write answers for me. And that was a gift. It continues to be a gift. And we talk about it in the book. We give people a sampling of the questions, because sometimes when I'm feeling a little lonely, I open up that book. And believe it or not, when I hear his answers to the questions, it isn't so much the substance of the answer, but I actually hear his voice.
Oh,
And that to me is a great connection.
So there are a couple, that's a great segue for me. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm not sure if you know this, but we coach leaders, and one of the things we ask them to do is journal every single day with their coach. And so, putting some things down in writing for yourself, for your kids, identifying what you see for yourself as you get older, as you get into the second half of life, is extremely powerful. And leaving something behind for your kids is an amazing thing to do. One of the things I did was I actually interviewed my dad and recorded it. And what was really, really fascinating was that shortly thereafter that he had a stroke and his speech was impaired, like dramatically slurred terribly. And a couple of years after that, I went back and listened to the recording. I couldn't even recognize his voice. I didn't even realize he had such a thick accent. My whole life, I never really heard his accent. But when I went back to it, I'm like, whoa, I never noticed that before. But that's like a treasure that I have for always. So guys, whoever's listening, go journal, come to Frame of Mind Coaching. We have a complimentary journal for everybody to be using right now during the COVID-19 era, let's call it. Come join us, frameofmindcoaching.com. Finally, what I want to do is just, how do people find your book? Is it on Amazon?
yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
it
let's say
is.
it one more time. Pack lightly, making sense of the second half of your life. Go buy it and look for those journaling questions.
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Lisa and Victor, thank you so much for your
thank
time.
you, Kim.
It was great getting to
Yeah.
know you and learning a little bit from you. And I think a lot of people will appreciate this little bit of a lighter view, actually, of what it looks like as we age. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you for
so
your
much,
kindness.
Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.